Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mentors Who Made Us podcast. I'm Kate Berezo. Today, I'm joined by Dave Wilkin. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me. Love the podcast theme and what you're up to.
Yes, very excited to chat with you today because you have been building something that is very much on brand with the podcast theme over the last many of years. I would love for you to just get us started with an introduction of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so Dave Wilkin, I'm the co-founder of 10KC, or some known as 10,000 Coffees, and we built 10KC. I mean, it really goes back to my personal story growing up in a small town, but we saw that it's relationships between people that create the best career moments, the best learning moments, the biggest aha moments for entrepreneurs. But when people learn and share from each other, they unlock so much. And even LinkedIn stats show that 85% of jobs happen through relationships and networks. And so, well, some people spend so much time putting resumes in at job boards. What sometimes they forget about is that 85% of opportunities are actually through relationships, mentors, networks, coffee chats. And so we saw that it's being like a huge opportunity because most people don't have equal access to those. And it's actually really hard to think about, hey, how do I, as a leader, connect with all this great talent that's decentralized and it's all over the world these days? And how do I build those relationships so that I can hire and attract and get to know the best talent? And on the other side, you have all these amazing people that may not be as happy as they could be in their job, or maybe they don't even know what kind of careers could exist with the things they're super passionate and skilled. And so that's where we saw this big opportunity where we could almost apply online dating matching technology to skills and careers and to create collisions between people that turns into things like mentoring or coffee chats or career chats. And if we could systematically help people create those relationships, we saw that we could actually democratize opportunity, which is a huge opportunity. When you democratize opportunity, you create happier people, more productive societies, uh, more successful countries and regions and communities. And so democratizing opportunity is amazing for people at an individual level, but it's also amazing for communities, regions, countries. And so that's why we built 10KC. As a gay entrepreneur coming from a really small town, I saw kind of the hard way that it's a really brutal situation to not have people that can advocate for you. And so we saw that technology could really accelerate that. And that's when we created 10KC. We were one of the first in the world to do it. We are now the largest diversity founded mentoring and networking platform in the world. We power over 200 mentoring and networking programs to scale these experiences in all different ways, shapes, and forms, whether it's leadership development or career development or women's mentoring programs or helping organizations like GE scale their mentoring programs that are supporting underrepresented people within engineering teams. Like really cool problems where you never would have thought that that's where this would have went, but we saw that if you can help people scale relationships, you can democratize opportunity.
That's amazing. And I also coming from a small town, I just understand that struggle of like, you know, everything you know and is right there in front of you. But then if you want something that's different outside of that, it feels like this whole unknown world that you have to like kind of travel into. I'm curious, like, who inspired you to start 10KC? Like, thinking about like the people in your life, like that's a big deal to start a company and to think, yeah, like I'm going to create this thing that doesn't exist yet, be the first to do it. Like, who are the people in your life who kind of planted those seeds for you to dream that big?
Yeah, when you grow up in a small town, sometimes you think, hey, like it is harder to get opportunity generally, right? Because usually you just don't have the same exposure to
Hmm.
industries or career paths. And as a result, you don't have the same relationships. And if you don't have the same relationships, you don't have access in the same way. So it is different when maybe you're growing up or you're from a family where you're first generation or first generation to the country or even first generation to college. And it is more difficult. But there's also another side to that I think is really inspiring, which is that when you grow up in a small town, you have the opportunity to get involved and to know your neighbors and to make things happen, start nonprofits, volunteer. And that's what I did. And I look back and I'm just really happy that that's the path I took, because the first people that that inspired me were people like my parents who, small town, working family. But when something was broken, they fixed it. So when we had to raise money for like the local church, they did it. They created a food drive. When the local playground was going to get shut down, they found a way to create fundraisers and bring people together and motivate them. And for me, that's actually entrepreneurship. It's
Yeah.
it's when you see a problem and you want to fix it and you want to motivate people to get involved and give their time and energy and passion towards it. That's actually what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship is not raising some crazy VC round. And of course, that's important. At some stage, it's entrepreneurship at its core is like fixing problems. And I think small
Mhm.
town communities give people the opportunity to fix those problems more than anywhere. And for me, that's how I met the people that inspired me. It's people like my parents, it's people like my high school teachers who helped create opportunities for us to start nonprofits and charities and just ways to make the community better. And that was kind of my initial building blocks of entrepreneurship. It wasn't some MBA, it wasn't like
Yeah.
a fancy program. It was like doing things, getting my hands dirty and giving my time. And then from there, going to college and getting a full scholarship to go to college was like my big break. And it was through that scholarship that got me kind of out of that small town and being given an opportunity to go to a big college and have an opportunity that many people in my family would have never had a chance to go and do. And it was through that scholarship that I was able to get access to peer mentors, like people in other programs,
Mm.
people who were a few years ahead of me in college who had got their first job and could help me understand what that looked like. And those people, you look back and you go, well, that's not a big deal. It's just getting your first job. It's like, well, actually, that was a huge deal at the time. Like getting your first job is really daunting and really difficult. And those people helping me navigate were game changers. And then you think about the people, going to conferences in college and seeing speakers, and after the conference finding ways to go meet these speakers and ask them if they want to have a coffee. And doing that helped me meet my first mentor, who was also from a small town, who became an entrepreneur, exited their company for millions of dollars, became super successful. And I saw this huge, it was the first time I saw this person from a small town who sold a company for millions of dollars, who built it all themselves. And asking that person for coffee turned out to become my mentor, who I still, see and keep in touch with today. And it's those little moments that at the time may seem kind of fleeting or not that significant, but believe it or not, it's those opportunities that when you invest in become mentors, sponsors, career conversations that were instrumental to build uh, companies like I have today. And so those are the people that inspire me. And I think those are the people that I still am so fond of and grateful for.
No, I love that. And I love that you've created a whole platform based on that experience, just asking someone for coffee. And it's like amazing to see what can happen when I think a lot of people have to get out of their comfort zone to when they think of like, oh, like asking someone for coffee or asking for a coffee chat, even virtually. I think a lot of young people I've heard are intimidated by um, the fact of like, oh, what if they're going to say no? Or what if I bother them? Oh, they're too busy. I'm curious from your experience, what is the biggest barrier you've seen people face when seeking mentorship and how can they overcome that?
Yeah, I think you hear it all the time, right? People are like, do they really want to talk with me, or what's in it for them? And first of all, the worst case scenario is you just don't get a reply or you get a no. So
Right.
you got to get used to getting a no, and you got to celebrate when you get a no, because it means that you tried and you can try again. And so just getting really comfortable with reaching out and taking chances. And 19 out of 20 times you're going to get a no in some cases, and that's part of that's part of it all. And you just got to
Yeah.
keep on going. But what a lot of people forget is, if you're thoughtful and you're looking up who these people are, and you're not just writing really ridiculous impersonalized notes, yeah, of course you're going to get shut down then. But look at your alumni network, look at the community, like do a little research on these people. And something that I did that I, pretty much maintain today is every Sunday I would go to a coffee shop and I'd spend 3 hours and I would just like research people and find 5 to 10 people and then I would write them a note to try to grab a coffee with them. And I did that because I had zero network. I knew nobody and I was building my first company. And when I would do that, you'd get sometimes zero replies and sometimes you'd get almost all of them replying. And I'd store it all in a spreadsheet and I'd stay connected. I'd write down what I had learned. I'd write down how I can action. I'd write down something specific I could thank them for. And I did that every single Sunday. And if you do 2 hours a week, maybe it's 30 minutes a week, sometimes it might be 6 hours a week. And if you just commit to doing that for a year, you would be shocked how much more visibility you're going to get into opportunities and skills and learning opportunities. You're going to be shocked at some friends that you're going to make that you may have never met before. You're going to be shocked at uh, how many rejections you're going to get as well, and that's part of it that is okay too. And so that's like my best advice is to create a habit around
Mm.
this practice of career conversations. Don't do it just like don't like binge it where all of a sudden you're doing it and then you forget and you stop. Like commit to a couple hours a week or 30 minutes a week and build a habit and do it and know that you'll do it for the rest of your life. And when you do it that way, you really start to build like a muscle group around it and you overcome rejection. You don't expect immediate gratification because that doesn't happen. There's no immediate gratification here. It's something that happens over time. And so that I think that habit is what people have to think of as something that they're going to do for the rest of their life. It's something that they're not that good at, that they're going to get better at. And the reality is that people want to meet you, but it doesn't happen immediately and it happens over time and it happens when you invest in it. And do a little research, take some time, check out 10,000 Coffees. We have a lot of content that can like teach you around how to do it. Uh, and uh, and just like and know that it's a part of life and it's a part of your whole career and just keep going.
Having it as a habit, I love that you said that. I think is like some of the best advice is treating it like something that's part of your weekly routine is the best way to sustainably reach those goals around, I think, networking and fostering those just like conversations that truly like can lead to life-changing opportunities. I'm curious, like, do you have a powerful success story from 10KC that where a simple copy chat led to either a big opportunity or any success stories of your own that come to mind?
Yeah, I think there's so many. So now 10KC or 10,000 Coffees, we are a technology company that powers organizations and companies mentoring, networking, relationship building programs. And we do that where, imagine you join a company the day you join, you're getting matched to people that can help you as a mentor, as a buddy, or getting to know people from different teams and departments. And it really helps connect the organization together and create knowledge sharing, create culture. And so, we've created millions of these experiences. And so there's tons of opportunities. At the highest levels, I think some of the things that we're most proud of is that we've been able to create more access and more outcomes and more efficiency around this for organizations that are like 500 people and organizations that are hundreds of thousands. And what that actually does for these organizations is it creates more innovation, it creates higher performing cultures, it helps create more like retention. So people are staying at these companies for longer and finding new opportunities inside of these companies, which is just making like happier, higher performing people and careers, which I think for the individual is just such a nice thing when you can work at a company and find opportunities within it, thanks to the 10KC powered programs. And a lot of these companies and organizations have these types of programs today, but they're usually on Excel spreadsheets. They're super manual. Kate, they're things like you used to run. They're
Yes.
really clunky. And what we do is just really help supercharge them. So help them like automate, scale, create nudges, and so the things at the highest level that were most successful is those big, how we're like transforming organizations to make them really high performing, really connected, lots of knowledge sharing. On the individual level, it's like it's always surprising what we hear come through. You know, something that always sticks with me is I remember one of these stories where we launched a kind of mentoring knowledge sharing program that was connecting all of the highest performing people inside the organizations with their leaders. How do they help leaders connect with all these people who are just like really great, but otherwise might not have connections to the leaders? After the first kind of matching experience, so all these people had their first kind of conversation, we got this scathing review. Like it was so negative, it was so bad. The more senior person was like, "Get me out of this. This is ridiculous. This person showed up, but they were on their phone the whole time. They didn't make eye contact. What a waste of time. Like, cancel it." And we were like, "Oh no." So whenever those things get reported, you of course have to let the program managers know at the organization. And so we let them know. We had a call. They're like, "What do we do about this?" And the strange thing is on the other side, the high performing kind of like Gen Z aged colleague was like, "It was amazing, learned so much, such a great program." We're like, "Wow, this could not," on one hand, the leader is like, "Get me out of here, this is awful." And the junior colleague was like, "This was amazing." So we had a conversation with the junior colleague first to understand what was so good about it. And they're like, "I typed so many notes on my phone. I had so many questions on my phone. I learned so much." Like, oh no, what a great example of generational difference where that senior leader expects that people look and show up a certain way, but there's now 5 generations in the workforce. People write notes differently. There's more introverted colleagues that there's like neurodivergence where people on like technology groups might just not show up the same way like a super extroverted salesperson might show up. And so it's this like we call it like an unfortunate love story where these people actually could have unlocked so many things, but
Hmm.
all of these kind of preconceived notions and biases blocked that from the leader. Like imagine how many times that leader has missed on talent because they think that the talent's going to look or feel or show up in a way that they do, which is just not the case anymore because they come from so many different backgrounds. And so when we, the person that ran the program at this company called the leader and was like, "Hey, like, listen, we actually talked to them. They wrote so many notes. They want to meet with you again. They loved everything that you'd shared." Obviously, it was a big kind of aha moment for that leader. But I find that was like one of the most exciting success stories that sticks with me today because I'm like, without a technology system that creates those collisions and guides people through these experiences, people don't have the skills and they don't have the competencies around relationship building. And if they are not doing that inside the company, imagine the client experience. Imagine when they're in the bank branch meeting a new customer and they're bringing those preconceived notions about what a customer should look like and or act like. And it's just a huge miss that if you don't bring together these generations, you miss so much idea sharing, talent opportunities. And so that was a big aha moment for us, for that company, for that leader. And it's just a huge opportunity for any organization to say, like, let's like check some of our let's practice this skill and get comfortable with it. And I think it's the same thing on the Gen Z side or a millennial side, right? They show up and they meet somebody who might be older and might not be as they may not talk the same and they might write them off as like, oh, they're just like an old boomer, right? And the reality is that we've got to figure out ways to bring different generations together because there's so much opportunity to be had.
Mentorship, it's a bridge for connection, and I can't tell you how many times that scenario played out in my years of supporting mentorship programs where the mentor goes, "I don't think they like that," or "I don't know, they didn't seem very engaged," and then it turns out the mentee had the best time and learned so much and has a whole like 10 pages of notes that they're like ready to implement.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the thing that I wish I could bring into the real world about mentorship or like platforms like TEDKC is that the people who are the bridge builders that can say, "Hey, wait, actually, no, something happened here where a connection was missed or a signal was missed, or this is a different thing. Are you still open to it?" And the amount of matches that I've seen go on to become some of the best matches after a initial like hiccup like that, it blows my mind. It just makes me always question and wonder like if the world, if we had little mediators and everyday connections, just how much connect like people would actually be connecting with each other and relating to each other more than they would perceive initially. I
Totally.
love that story. Love that story though. I'm curious from your perspective, like how can organizations foster a culture that promotes mentorship and open networking?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is the reason we exist as an organization is to help that. And I think over the last few years, we're now more decentralized than ever before. Through COVID, we've become totally decentralized, where teams
Mm-hmm.
in the UK are actively working with people in San Francisco, and relationships, without relationships, people can't get work done and they can't be as productive. And so organizations, I think, now have seen that they've got to do better to create that. And I think a lot of organizations are now like, well, we're going to bring everyone back to the office full time, which is fine, but they forget that, the skills and people and ideas are still fully decentralized. So you can't just think that, people that are going to office X are going to solve all the problems. You still have to create those, remove geographic barriers to relationships. And I think they're seeing that in their engagement score surveys and so many other places. And so for so many organizations, they're trying to do things today, but they're now ready to supercharge them. And I think when we would have first met years ago, a lot of organizations maybe didn't have kind of core leadership development or learning experiences that focused on that social learning element. Social learning being how people learn from each other, whether that's mentoring, sponsorship, networks, buddies, leader chats, but it's really getting people to learn from each other. And now it's their opportunity to take it to the next level and innovate it where they're able to reach more people, get more people to have outcomes, to save time and effort and not kind of do it the old fashioned way, but know that like there's AI and technology that's going to scale it. And so I think the advice for organizations is to find those existing talent learning leadership programs and challenge technology to take that to the next level. Don't think of it as like a new activity or something that's side of desk, but it's actually core to like their skills agenda, leadership development agenda, onboarding experiences that help people become productive and stay at the organization after 12 or 24 months, and innovate in those areas rather than thinking of it as like a nice to do side of desk
Right.
activity.
Why do you think that so many organizations do kind of think of it as this like back burner, oh, it's a nice to have, but not a necessary like thing to foster within the organization?
I think there's some kind of old school mentalities around this where the idea of people meeting and sharing is kind of like really old school mentoring where 30 years ago career paths were super linear. There was very much hierarchical structures. You kind of like did one job for 4 years, and so the result of that is that mentoring wasn't really dynamic. It was really static. It was very much like older colleague giving all the advice to the junior colleague to travel down that very linear path. But over the last 30 years, that it could not have been shattered more. There's infinite career paths. I think it's like 80% of the jobs that will exist in 10 or 20 years from now don't exist today. So jobs and skills are changing so quickly. And so the result of that is that mentoring and networking is actually not this one directional uh, benefit. It's actually something that everyone has to do to knowledge share. We have so many people retiring from the workforce and so many people entering the workforce. And so they need a knowledge share. And so I think a lot of people just haven't caught up with the modern concepts of what social learning is, and that it's so much more than the one trick pony of senior colleague creating one way benefit to a junior person to help them in what was a very linear career world. And so once, like, I think people are now catching up to that where they go, oh, wait, actually, this is core to innovation. This is core to like keeping up with what's new. It's critical for all of our retiring workforce to impart knowledge to the junior colleagues and junior colleagues to also really help them catch up with all of these new relevant experiences. So that is the new way of thinking and working. there's a lot of education there because people, when they hear mentoring, it comes with almost like a lot of preconceived notions of the old
Hmm.
school approach, whereas like mentoring is actually way more dynamic. It looks and feels so much different than what it might have looked like in the past, and it's a lot more dynamic. But you know, some organizations, like that's why companies like 10KC exist, right? Is we have to help organizations get there.
Right. No, I love that. I think that's like such a great like descriptor of things have changed so much, and now it's refreshing to hear that people are finally catching up though with that social learning that's so critical. If you want to be at the top of your game, you have to have your people be at the top of their game, and you do that by fostering connections, I think. I'm curious, in your experience, what qualities make someone a great mentor or mentee?
Yeah, I think everybody's a mentor and a mentee. And I think there's
Yes.
no quality that makes somebody a mentor or a mentee. I think everyone has to say, okay, I'm a teacher, I'm a student. I'm and like start there as a mindset shift versus, well, I guess I'm like 20 years in, I should be a mentor and just start to it's like, no, actually every single person has the ability to learn and teach and grow. And let's figure out ways to allow people to play all different types of roles of learning, sharing, growing, collaborating in different ways. But when, if you think of it from a more traditional approach, I think when everyone, you know, the more you teach, the more you learn. And so for people that are helping somebody who, so think about more traditional as a mentoring approach, I think you got to start with like, hey, I realize that the more I teach and the more I help somebody else, I'll actually have more aha moments. And I can tell you that out of the millions of experiences that we've created, you'll hear a lot these mentors who thought they were like giving their time actually walked away out of them and said, wow, I actually think I benefited more because it just got me to break down problems and think about my career and my role in my company in these new ways that I like would never have done if I didn't take that 45 minutes every month to meet with somebody and explore my industry with them. And so I think when, as a mentor, the more you say, okay, I'm going to learn a lot as much as I teach, and
Hmm.
then there's a really great reason to commit that 1 hour a month or something to a mentee. I think the other thing about a mentor is to experience share versus like give advice. So share your experiences. Don't like try to tell them advice because they need to learn through your experience. They don't need kind of the conditions are just so different than when anyone has went through problems that they can't just take your playbook and solve it again. And I think last thing is to just like commit to it. I think a lot of people, you know, human connection's a lost art for a lot of people.
Hmm.
And they meet somebody and then they kind of chicken out or they think, oh, we have nothing in common. That was a waste of time. It's like, you've got to commit to it. Like, you've got to say, okay, I'm going to carve an hour a month and I'm going to do it for 6 months. And then I'm going to see how it's going. And so I think for mentors and mentees, like, you've got to commit to it and just like, it's 6 hours. Like, some people scroll on Instagram for 6 hours a day. This is like
Right.
6 hours in 6 months. And then for the mentee, I'd say, like, you know, be prepared, send follow-up notes, do research, like shut up and listen is like sometimes what we say to people. Like, when someone's like talking you through things, don't, it's not beneficial to feel like you have all the answers or to like try to be defensive. And as a mentee, just like really listen and take it in. Don't try to, I think sometimes insecurity makes people feel like they need to like respond or have answers or, and like you don't have to do that. Like, having humility is okay in these situations. And we've heard a lot, especially in kind of the new workforce, is that they feel like, well, I saw on TikTok this, or I saw, it's like you don't need to have all the answers. Just like shut up, listen, take it in, ask questions, be vulnerable. Being like having all the answers or feeling like you have all the answers is not does not make you look better than somebody else.
That is so real. That is the number one thing that I think there's like pride in not knowing everything and not having all the answers. Like they like try to find pride in that, I think, where it's like, oh, that's just an opportunity to learn. It's so interesting though, that pressure that folks feel to like have to feel like they get everything right and how much that comes into the mentoring relationships too, I think. But I can't agree enough more, though, about what you said about mentors typically coming and saying that they got just as much out of it as the mentees do. I think that's something that is very classic in mentorship programs, is you'll find that the mentors came in expecting to give all this advice and provide all this help, and they realized that they got just as much out of it as the mentee did, or at least that's the ideal scenario. I would just love to know, if you could go back, what advice would you give your younger self?
What would I give my younger self? I think, what would I do? I think first would be to stick with things. I think if I look back, I'm like really grateful that I like stuck through things, right? Like for 10KC, we struggled and struggled. Like I probably should have given up like 10 times, and I almost felt like it. And fortunately, my team members and my colleagues that I still work with today, we all kept each other going. And, and then 2 years ago, we brought on a $56 million investor with private equity, and we got there. And I think, sometimes it feels like if you've spent something for 3 months and it's not working, you quit and you leave. But like you've got to stick with things for a long time to get outcomes. I think there's also like in your 20s, you should be like working hard. You and you should be growing your network, building your reputation, and exploring as many things as possible. But do not think that you've got it all figured out. Like your 20s are really a chance to like experiment, to try new things. Like that decade, you should just be thinking, how do I meet people? How do I work on tough problems? How do I try things? You make like 90% of your money at over the age of 40. It's like this the stats like 95% or more of your wealth you start to make over the age of 40. So when you're in your 20s, like think about how you are building who you are, what you like, and work hard. Don't party it all away. And then in your 30s, then it starts to feel really exciting because you start to like have some momentum. You start to like have a professional network. And so then you have to keep doubling down on that. But I find in your 20s, some people just think that they need to have it all figured out within like 2 years of college. And it's more just like running experiments, trying new things, and just building as much equity in your reputation, in the relationships that you have, and the types of organizations you work with. And I know everyone says the world's small, but in your 20s, like do not burn bridges, like deliver, work hard, do great things. And I would really want to instill that in my younger self. And I think having done that allowed us to, build a global technology company, bring on some of the best private equity investors, and get to where we are today, where we're working with Nike, GE, JP Morgan, AIG, top organizations. You gotta deliver. Those would be those would be, I think, some of my main things.
I love it. No, those are great, great, great advice. And my last question for you is like, I would just love to know, what's the next big goal for you in 10,000 copies?
I think for the industry's changing so much, and I think it goes back to the industry started from a place of like very static mentoring, where it's a senior person imparting wisdom on a junior person. And for us, what we have been working with organizations around is helping people create collisions to create knowledge sharing of all types. And so building these experiences into all parts of career, professional development, leadership development, innovation. And so that's what we're really building around is we know if you can create proximity between people, help them turn that proximity into great conversations and learnings, you in the world of AI where people are going to have less and less personal conversations because you're just going to be able to prompt things and AI is going to like develop things, we're going to have to really solve for the human side of it throughout all aspects of industry and organizations. And so I think that the more in this next chapter that I'm most excited about is alongside the disruption of AI will be the necessity for human relationships and trust. And that's really what 10KC will help organizations do.
That's amazing and so needed. And it just gives me a lot of hope to look forward to. I think just thinking about like just a technology company that's like focus exclusively on making those human connections, I think is very powerful and so needed. Though that's all I have for you today, Dave. Thank you so much for joining us, and take care.
Yeah, so great to reconnect and congrats on the podcast.